Thank you for joining us for the annual video series from the International Symposium on Human Identification. Today, we are very lucky to have Julie Sikorsky with us. Julie, we have talked before, and I'm so happy you're back.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you tell us, for people who haven't watched the other videos, a little bit about yourself and your background?
I can do that. That's something I do know. My name is Julie Sikorsky, and I'm the Forensic Biology Unit Manager at the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office Crime Laboratory. I've been there for 20 years, 10 years as a senior scientist, and then 10 years now as a manager supervisor. So,
All right,
yeah.
that's amazing. Wow.
It's flown by, I have to say.
We love seeing you pretty much every year. It's wonderful.
I know. I think this is my 7th or 8th issue that I've been to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the beginning, I wasn't able to go to.
Sure.
It was a coveted meeting. Let's just say it always is. It's a little easier when you're the supervisor to get permission to go.
Yes,
because you give it to yourself.
Yes. Well, you have a fascinating talk this year, and it's about mobilizing your DNA lab for rapid DNA response for mass casualty events. So that's definitely something that is in the news, and the more rapid DNA becomes available, developing protocols and systems, that's sort of at the forefront. Can you tell us about it?
Well, as the Sheriff's Office at the Forensic Biology Unit, we've been interested in rapid for many, many years. I don't believe initially ever thought of its application to mass identification events. So what we did was we've been following the development of rapid, and we've been working and collaborating with multiple people as it's kind of been a thought thing, and then it actually went to manufacturing. We worked with a couple different manufacturers and helping that technology really develop. And finally, when it was ready, we did purchase it. So in that purchasing, we didn't quite know what we were going to do with it, but we'd invested so much time in its development that we really kind of wanted to kick the tires, especially to help the other forensic community and the other laboratories really understand a place for it. So we did get a rapid, I want to say back in 2018, and finally went online with it in 2020. That was one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, was bringing rapid DNA online for casework. And then one of the 3 things we wanted to do with rapid, other than bring it online and kind of help our constituents who also brought on rapid, was to capitalize on its mobility and see what we could do with it. And in the wake of the campfires in California and the Surfside condo collapse in Miami, we really, this needed to be a priority, and we needed to kind of move it along. It had been kind of a slow roll for us because it's one of those things. It is a need, but it's a need lower on the priority list. So when we were exploring the opportunity of rapid DNA, and we knew the instrumentation was there, we wanted to see how other agencies were implementing it. And we've been known somewhat as early adopters. We're not the super early adopters, but we get in there pretty early. So I actually took a trip out to the Orange County District Attorney's Office, and they were using rapid DNA. They had their own database. And so we really learned so much from them, and they were so gracious in sharing a lot of their lessons learned and things that they've already done. So that really helped us solidify how we were going to implement rapid DNA, at least give us some direction. So when we decided to look at rapid DNA for mass disasters, that was one piece of the puzzle. And we knew, because rapid DNA mobilizing the laboratory is a huge undertaking. I mean, it's a mind-blowing operation to move DNA processing outside. How are we going to look at this? So we did reach out to quite a few people. There's a lot of information out there on responding to DVI events. I call them mass identification events because there's so much more you can do besides an event where there's complete tragedy and death. There's also identification of individuals from human trafficking stash houses, or we've seen those semi-trucks with migrants coming in, and identification of those individuals. So there was a lot of opportunity there. So we utilized some resources in the community, but we also reached out to Marshall University Forensic Science Center. They had a resource we didn't have, which are called students. And I was hoping that maybe we could get the manpower we needed to really take a project like this on, because we were focused on casework. And being able to mobilize and respond to an event like this is a need. It's a need for every forensic laboratory, but it's quite low on the priority list right now. Our priorities now are like, let's stay up and running and do regular casework. So by reaching out to a partner that could help us, I think that helped us really bring this across the finish line. So we did that about a year ago and got a TAP intern named Dana DeVito. Big shout out, Dana. She was fantastic, and she really developed and changed and modified and embraced all the available resources and kind of made them our own, but also made them so they were accessible to everyone else in the community should they want to have the same type of stand up, the same sort of a response.
It's amazing to see all of the collaboration. I think that's fantastic. And especially you reaching out, the support that was offered, involving students who, are the future of what's going to be happening. For our viewers who aren't forensic scientists, what is the difference between rapid DNA and other DNA technologies?
So rapid DNA, as the name implies, is quite rapid, whereas a traditional DNA workflow may take anywhere from, half a day if you're really speedy and it's an easy sample, and you're only doing that sample to, a week or more, depending on the technologies you have. Rapid DNA is sample in, answer out. It takes about 90 minutes on either platform because there's two main manufacturers right now. And you put essentially a swab into a cartridge or a chip and put that into the instrument, and 90 minutes later you have a DNA profile, and hopefully a good one.
That's amazing. I think before some of the shows like CSI, it looked like things were happening very quickly, but that was not the case. And then suddenly the technology really started to move forward.
Yes.
Rapid DNA, I feel like we've been talking about it, since maybe, a little before 2012, but that's when a commercially available product became available.
That's correct, yeah.
What do you think the hesitancy has been for some places to implement it?
Several things. Change is hard. Forensics is not known as that discipline that's like, hey, yeah, this is the newest, greatest, best thing. There are those individuals that will go and kind of take it and feel it out for us, which is what we appreciate, but we're a cautious bunch. I think the vision of how you would use that and implement that into your laboratory is, I think, the biggest hesitancy with rapid, because you really don't want to have it as, you don't want to get it and then figure out what you're going to do with it. You want to make sure you have an idea of how to apply it and getting it for one thing. So if you're going to get it for emergency cases to run a standard or whatnot, it just seems very limited. So that's why we really give a lot of thought to the scope and how we would implement it in casework, but also have it in the event we needed to mobilize it to a mass identification event. So it was a two-prong approach, and hopefully by showing others that it can be used in that manner and it can be used successfully in that manner, we will be able to encourage other adopters and say, come on in, the water's fine. It won't be for everyone, but it certainly is a very useful and valuable tool.
Absolutely. Even when we began talking about it, it sounded like it could really change some things. And if nobody wants to have a mass casualty event, but rapid identification can really change what that looks like for everyone involved in the investigation and the families.
Yes. Yes.
What are some of the drawbacks as well as the benefits? How do you balance both of those?
We'll start with the benefits.
Yeah.
I'll do the positives first.
Sure.
It's rapid. It's fast. Our field has had a push for efficiency for so long, and hopefully something that can help us reduce backlogs. And one of the applications in our laboratory is to run standard-only cases. So when we have, say, a case, say a sexual assault kit, and it's negative for biological material, we would use rapid just to run that suspect standard and do a modified analysis, which means an analyst interprets that profile, and that profile actually goes into CODIS. So in a way, it does help with our efficiency, I would say, at least in our hands. It also, other than it's the fact that it's rapid, it's very portable, which makes it very amenable to our mass identification scenarios. They both have small footprints. Both the Andy and the Thermo Fisher Rapid Hit ID have small footprints. They're able to be mobilized. So that really is an advantage. You can run lower template samples as well as high template samples on both instruments. Just you vary the cartridge or the chip that you use in there. As far as drawbacks, right now, currently with the existing instrumentation is the sensitivity. These instruments are not meant for crime scene samples. They're not meant for mixtures. This I hopefully will change in the future. I really am a proponent of this technology, and I think there is a place for it. At this juncture, traditional DNA analysis is not going to go away at this juncture. But with this, you have to be really responsible about the certain sample types you put in there. Again, no mixtures, because the dynamic range is limited in this instrumentation. So you really can't deconvolute or break apart those mixtures very effectively. Additionally, those lower template samples, there is a limit, and you don't want to put all of your faith in the instrument in case you don't get a profile in which you could have gotten a profile using traditional analysis. So those are the benefits and the drawbacks to these instruments. I'm sure I could list more, but those are kind of the basic ones that I see. All of them just still make this a very effective tool.
Absolutely. I'm sure then programmatically you want to put everything into place so everybody knows when it's appropriate to use which technology, how large your sample is, what you're going to be doing with it. I believe your program has 3 major pillars that you mentioned. Can you talk about those?
So yes, our Rapid DNA program, which started in 2020, we have 3 major pillars. The first is to integrate Rapid DNA into our case workflow. And that's really where we're going to see running standard only cases when we've got a profile that was generated traditionally and we develop a person of interest and law enforcement goes and gets that standard. We can quickly put that in the instrument, compare it to our unknown sample and say, yes, this is a match, this isn't, go get an arrest warrant. We've used it also to confirm off-ladder alleles because we're a fusion laboratory for our traditional analysis, and our rapid hit IDs use Global Filer Express, so we're able to confirm those off-ladder alleles. We use them for CODIS confirmations all the time. We get that secondary standard in from an individual. We can quickly confirm that CODIS hit. So that's the first pillar, is integrating it into casework. The second pillar is being a resource. And as we're aware, these instruments can be marketed to anyone. So we service, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office services over 30 agencies in Palm Beach County. Any one of them could decide to get rapid. And so we want to make sure that we're familiar with the technology, we understand its limits, we understand its advantages, and we could serve in an advisory capacity. At this juncture, we're not going to be serving as a reach back resource because that would be a lot of agencies to have to support on this type of technology, but we certainly want to be informative to them and really advise them of the advantages and mostly the limitations, because I do believe law enforcement thinks they could put anything in this instrument and get these really amazing results out, and we're just not there yet. The other part of being a resource is when our state decides to go to booking station, collection, and upload, that we are able to be a resource to my own agency. And I do know Florida is getting there. Louisiana was the first to go online with that, and Florida is almost there. So I think that was really important to be that sounding board for our agency. They're a little timid of the technology, even though it's incredibly easy to use. And I did forget to mention that the ease of use of this is probably one of the major advantages, other than it being super fast. And the third pillar is this mass identification piece, being able to take all of this all of the learning, all of the testing and the validation we've done, and move that outside of a traditional laboratory environment and make sure that we've developed a validated procedure to do that, the validated protocol, so that we can actually take those samples, run in the field at a mass identification event, and if they are CODIS eligible, get those into the database.
When you talk about a mass casualty event, obviously the tragic events of 9/11 affected us all deeply. And then you see 2012, more commercially available rapid DNA. In your opinion, do you think that event helped shape the speed with which the technology moved and people being interested in it?
I'm not sure. I know what came out of 9/11, hands down, was the identification that DNA is needed in these events. They're still using DNA to identify individuals to this day. There have been multiple publications on lessons learned, and it has really helped push the DNA field forward. I don't know. I know the thought of miniaturizing DNA analysis existed prior to 9/11, or was definitely on the forefront. I can't comment to whether or not it really pushed it forward, but I think it definitely underscored the importance of DNA analysis. And then when some of these mass identification and mass disaster events started happening, I think it just became an organic solution for that. It's like, hey, this makes sense. This is portable. This is rapid. Why don't we do that? And maybe I'm limited in that. I personally, when I heard of rapid, that was not the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, we can bring these out to mass identification events. It was more like, oh, I can have a speedy solution in my laboratory to help efficiency. So I think it all kind of worked together and came about in the right way it needed to come about. Certainly, we learned a lot from 9/11, and it certainly underscored the importance of these events. So in a way, it all comes together.
Absolutely. One thing I was thinking about, you've talked about your 3 pillars, so you really did touch on some of this. But for somebody who is thinking about developing a program or just beginning, how did you come up with your goals, the project structure? What did you do to make it work?
Are you referring specifically to just the rapid program in general, or more the mass identification piece?
I would say both. Yeah. I mean, if that's possible to answer.
Sure. So rapid in general was a lot of fact finding. It was going out and visiting other laboratories that had it, using others' experiences. And when we started looking at it, again, it was a slow to adopt type thing. The instrumentation really hadn't been locked down per se. There was a lot of changes going on, and you know, admittedly, there still are. So we kind of just put feelers out. And once we saw that there was a clear path forward, we started small and we proceeded with caution. So we only looked at the casework piece first. We wanted to get comfortable with that. And we only brought one instrument online the first time. And we're only looking at the buccal reference samples. So it is, and I have a slide in my presentation that's how do you eat an elephant, and it's one bite at a time. So we really didn't try to take everything on. It was methodical. Also, it was a change management method, because if you change things too rapidly, you get a lot of pushback. So we really were methodical. So I would advise others to take a similar approach. A lot of headway has been made. We certainly are willing to share anything and everything that we've generated. PBSO.org, our agency website, you can actually go on there and see all of our manuals, all of our validation summaries, all of our forms. Anything you want to see is on there. So it includes our rapid validation write-ups. We've also, just to kind of circle back to the mass identification piece and how we looked at that, again, we reached out to Marshall University and then brought in an intern and really slowly again started developing these documents and this plan, and that culminated in an exercise, which then culminated in additional feedback. But my point on this is anything that we created with regard to that event and the planning to stand up this kind of mock event that we did, we'll also be putting forward facing on our website. So other agencies and laboratories that think that this might be of interest to them, which I highly encourage, can just go pull those documents down and really personalize them for themselves, because there's no one size fits all. I also highly encourage that they just get the conversation started within their laboratory, not necessarily about rapid in general, but how they would respond to a mass identification event and what resources are available to them. So if they cannot get rapid technology, maybe find a lab in the area or in the state that does and see how they could collaborate with them to help bring that technology to them, and maybe they can form a relationship. But I think it's really important. We know now it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this is going to happen, which isn't completely unfortunate. But with the number of school shootings and other horrible things that are going on in today's world, this is a necessary resource.
Absolutely. I really love that you have everything online for people to access. My next question was going to be, are there checklists? Are there procedures? How do you go about this? So the fact that you are sharing that, as well as, there are other people within their own state to reach out to, I think that really helps in developing a program because change is hard.
Change is hard, and developing anything from scratch, that's where we were stagnant, where it was, how do you eat an elephant? It just seems so big and so just unattainable. So if you start small and start doing that, it really helped. It helped having another resource too, because my focus is running the lab and making sure everybody has what they need to do casework, and none of us had the ability to do a lot, to have a lot of focus time on this, and we realized that that's the issue in all labs. So even if it's just getting that conversation started with your own county or local government or agency. And honestly, when we looked at this, while we did reach out and involve individuals, this was a forensic biology unit only event, and our scope was simple: move DNA operations outside of the traditional laboratory and make sure it worked. And by doing that, we took a project which seemed so overwhelming, and we made it palatable. We made it something like, okay, that's our expertise. We know how to take this out. We don't know what sample collection is going to look like. We don't know what family assistance center is going to look like. We don't know what who's going to get notified of the identification. We don't know those pieces. Those are other pieces of what I use as a pie. We just know our own slice. So let's focus there. Let's do what we do best and get that ironed out. And then we'll figure out the bigger piece. And now we do have a seat at the table at our agency's kind of mass identification, mass disaster planning committee, which they didn't even know we existed prior to us kind of knocking on doors and saying, hey, do we have a tent? Like, do we have generators we can use? Do we have portable air conditioners? And then they were kind of surprised, and they're like, yeah, DNA would be really useful at some of these events. So getting a seat at the table and starting that conversation was huge.
I think that's maybe one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard, because really that's true. With that coordination, if nobody really knows that there's another resource out there and an opportunity to work together. So,
and that, I think, was the most surprising piece, because we even reached out to our medical examiner's office and we said, hey, how do you guys handle when you have a mass identification event or a mass disaster event? How do you handle this? And they just looked at me like, well, we bring the bodies here. And I said, no, like when you need to deploy, when you need to stand up something in the field. What are you talking about? And then all of a sudden, some of the people that we met with were like, oh, we did this exercise like so many years ago. And the sad part was they really hadn't given it too much thought in so long that I feel like we did them a service, because it got their conversation started again. And then they then reached out and said, well, if we have one of these, what type of samples do you want? So now we have more of a collaboration going on within the county on what we would do. So if, and God forbid, this happens, we are that much more prepared. And again, we're not going to be able to go out there and just be seamless, but at least we've got the conversation started, and hopefully we'll be a little bit more resilient than if we had gone out there kind of half blind and knowing there are these pieces but not really knowing what to do.
Absolutely, it elevates all efforts. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you also were part of a workshop, and I heard a lot about it as I was walking around the conference yesterday. Can you tell us what that was about?
It was called The New Superior, A Better Way to Be the One in Charge. And essentially the focus of it was strengths-based leadership. And what that means is know your strengths, know your team's strengths, and exploit those. Like, why would you not, if someone has a really good gift at selling, like they're really good at engaging and convincing people, why would you not use them when you go to a meeting and you need, some piece of new equipment? You really want to exploit exploit maybe like kind of a bad word, but you really want to use those gifts to your advantage. And also by understanding those, you understand your own blind spots. And so you may have a gift in one area, but that leads to a certain blind spot in another, and you might have someone else in your team that will fill that blind spot. And then knowing how you can all complement each other And I truly believe, because this was a leadership workshop, that self-awareness is the key to good leadership and management. And that's one of the biggest things since I've become a manager, is really getting to know myself, really knowing where I say weak spots, they're not called blind spots, but knowing where those are and really trying to work on them, or at least recognize them, because they're always going to be there. And hopefully through these tools that we're learning, develop habits which hopefully allow me to be a more well-rounded leader, because we can't be balanced. We're always going to be good at some things and not at others. But being part of a good leader is realizing that, and then bringing people on board that make that full picture. Some people say, don't hire a yes person, because if you just hear what you want to hear, you're never going to grow. You need people that make you better, and those might be people that disagree with you, and you don't want to hire everybody that's the same personality as you are and have the same strengths as you are, because you won't fill all those gaps, because you can never be fully balanced. And it's like, if you try to be good at everything, you're going to be great at nothing. And so that was really kind of the crux in a nutshell. I spoke specifically on relationships and the importance of developing relationships within your office, and realizing you're not supervising robots. You're supervising human beings with all the beautiful, wonderful, crazy things human beings are, and having compassion and really trying to make a connection, because that's what we're all looking for in this world, is connection, and feeling that we're part of something great and big.
Yes. I think actually your first statement really struck me. Self-awareness is the key to everything. It really is. And when you're talking about leadership, that's where to start. How about the participants? It sounds like there were a lot of questions. They were really engaged. Any specific things, any key takeaways that might help other people who weren't able to attend but want to develop their own skills?
A shameless plug for John Collins in Critical Victories. He was the workshop organizer. He offers, and I took advantage of when I was a newer leader, his executive coaching, and really helping me to grow and get a little bit more self-confidence, because we talked a lot about this imposter syndrome. And if you talk to him, and I fully agree, everyone is a leader. Doesn't matter what your role or your title is. And so I think everyone can take that. You lead in many aspects of your life. But he's got a set of books and things. He just published a new book called The New Superior, ironically the title of our workshop. And it goes through the strengths-based leadership and again, self-awareness. And you don't have to be in a position of management to understand that. And his is specifically based on Clifton strengths. It's like a disc profile, but it's a little bit different. It's a little more eloquent. And I think that we all can benefit from that. So I would say maybe research down that line. To see, you can always reach out to John. He certainly is very gracious in helping anybody who wants to look in this direction. I know I've learned a lot from him. And I think all of us can prepare for management leadership now, because most of us are just these really good analysts, and then the next day you get a promotion and you're like, what just happened? I used to be this great autonomous individual, and now I'm supervising people. I just thought I got to make really fun decisions about the directionality of the lab. So there's no time like the present to look into that management leadership style. Because as John says, only 10% of us have any sort of natural leadership inclination. So just assume you're part of the 90% and you don't. And then that way you just strive to learn.
That's great advice. No matter where you're at, start preparing for it so you're ready when that role comes along.
Exactly. I used to have that quote actually on my computer screen. I still do, although I think it's in a box. We just moved laboratories. But I think that's perfect, because you just never know when that opportunity is going to arise.
No, you want to be ready for it.
Yes.
This has been fantastic. Did we miss anything that you wanted to make sure we covered?
I don't know. I can always talk. I think that's one of my Clifton strengths. Whether or not you want to hear, I'm sure I have something to say.
Well, we don't want to miss anything, but I also always like to ask, for somebody who's come back to Yishi 7-8 years, what brings you back? What do you like?
It fills my cup. It really does. I'm the type of person and if you ask John and my Clifton strengths, I thrive on connections and relationships and having quality relationships and getting to know people. And especially in this field, the networking is tops. And it's probably the same answer I gave last year, but the networking, it doesn't hurt that the topics of the talks, the presentations, the workshops are always top notch and very, very relevant to what we're all experiencing today and the things we need to be learning about. And so that in a combination of all of the other beautiful things that ISHE does for us, are why I want to come back every year. And I feel like I have to do something to justify coming here because I want to bring as many analysts as I can as well, because everyone needs to experience this conference. I always get asked, oh, I went last year, can I go again? And I'm like, well, I've got to rotate everyone through. But that's really what happens is this conference stands apart.
Well, Julie, we really appreciate having you here and the fact that you are presenting and helping with the workshop. I mean, it's amazing. So thank you for all that you do for us, too.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you again next year.
I guarantee that.
That's great. Perfect.